ask a few questions of the audience. And if you know the right answer, could you please raise your hand? Okay, so the first question is, do you know what PISP is? So I do. Great, I see some answers. Great. So to clarify that, PSP is when payments are initialized by organizations that do not hold accounts. So they're fintechs. They're organizations who are building applications or services, and they're not going through the normal regulatory process because they don't hold accounts, but they want to make payments. Okay. So there's another question. Does Mojaloop support the PISP use case? And I hope everyone says yes. If you think yes, please raise your hand. Yeah, so we do support the PISP use case. So here's the next question, why? Why does Mojaloop support the PISP use case? Because PISP is being provided by a lot of DFSP providers already. So what is special or different about why PSP, why Mojaloop uses PSP? So I would just like to talk you through, it's going to be hard to get the question answered by everyone. So I'm going to talk you through what I think about it. And if you disagree or have another opinion, we can have that discussion now. So there's a couple of different types of PSPs, so fintechs that might interact with Mojaloop. There is a simple one, which is a fintech organization is offering a service to the market. Payments is not their business, but they need to make payments and they need to receive payments. You know, that it's an edge part of their business. And if we have a centralized Mojaloop connectivity point where they can make their payment, they could then change to a different DFSP account without needing to rebuild the integration. So small benefit, not a big one. Okay. What if they were an organization providing a framework for solutions to lots of different organizations? It's much bigger, you know, like Apple Pay, but maybe it's not just payments, maybe it's services too. Then they need to have onboarded clients for many different DFSPs, so the account holding institutions are spread across the different providers. To have a centralized connection interface where we can do that in a standard interface is obviously very beneficial there. So introducing something like a Google Pay or something more African, let's say, some sort of African gateway application is definitely a possibility. But there's another reason as well, and that is the participant organizations. Okay, so the larger DFSPs who have accounts have already third-party payment platforms that people can connect to. But what happens if you're a small startup DFSP and you don't have the facilities to build that integration or build it safely or do it using best practice security, because it's actually quite hard to put together, and then convince the market that they can trust you in doing that. So offering this as a solution to the switch really supports those small businesses to be able to offer a service that uses third-party payment initiation without needing the onerous process of building that themselves. They can provide PSP service integration, which is a slightly higher level integration. But once they do that, PSP services can offer that across the board to their clients. So it opens up the market. So PSP version 2, where are we in getting this finalized? So we've got a special interest group and we meet bi-weekly or once every 2 weeks. I know that's, some people interpret that a different way. Once every 2 weeks, and we discuss and we go through this. We try and get input from a wide range of different people with different problems and different use cases. And we've been working through the design and we've been tweaking it so that it can in fact meet the requirements of the industry and the market. And we believe we're at that point now, so that's why we're pushing through the the PSP version 2. So we have an agreed upon set of changes, and we've submitted those to a wider audience for more discussion, and hence this talk right now. Next steps, we've got a formal proposal to the change control board for approval, and we need to provide some technical support documentation and some online documentation to go along with those changes. So we're almost there. So let me summarize what we've got in the set of changes that we've got documented in this PASP version 2. The first one is we've refactored the integration for fintechs. So we've got a fintechs-orientated interaction, which is simplified, and it's going to make it easier for third-party payment organizations to connect into the switch, and I'll go through that in more detail. Then the second benefit is in the request to pay use case. Oh, sorry about that. In the request to pay use case, we thought it might be a really good idea to allow this PISP interaction with the user, and maybe through an app or a handheld device, to be available to smaller bank holding organizations, so that they can use that facility to request authorization of a payment. So in other words, someone's requested a payment, and now they're going to use the PSP interaction to interact with their customer. And this is just really a cut out part of the PSP flows. It is the same way in the PSP flow that you do an authorization of payment. So we're making that available for payment acceptance. Then the third point is we've extended the integration. In fact, this was already there, but we've just now formalized it slightly. We've extended the PASP interaction so that you can ask for a payment. You can ask to receive a payment into your account, and we'll get into more detail of why that's important. Then we've also added in an authorization flow on the account linking process for account discovery. It was done before out of band. Now it's part of the API. It's an important step that needs to happen. And then lastly, some more information on revoking a consent, which is also important to build trust. So I'm going to take you through this in a little more detail. On the screen, I've represented the PSP as a fintech in that dark blue section. And in the light blue section, I've just to simplify this, so it's much easier to understand how it all fits together. But when you see the full spectrum of sequence diagrams, it gets really complex. So I've simplified it by collapsing all that into one block. So it's modular loop that we're talking to, but we're really talking to the blue bank, which is going to be that fintech's or the customer's bank account. So the interaction to that bank to perform these actions is going to be done through the call into modular loop. So that's visually what I've done here, and I would like so the first thing that I would like to show you is the simplified integration for PSP, and essentially we've simplified it into a two-step process. Now, it's actually forced calls, API calls, but because we always build asynchronous, that's because it's asynchronous. But essentially, through the SDK integrations, like we do in other places, it is really a two API call process from the backend system. So so that's why I'm calling it a two-step process. So on that first step, we need to make a payment, and that results in a post third-party payment transaction request into modular and Bluebank. And then the Bluebank performs a series of actions. They do this discovery call, and they capture the payee information. They do a quote call or agreement phase, and they capture the conditions around the transfer, and then they create a challenge um, for the PISP, for the customer to fulfill. And then they communicate that back using the put call back to the fintech. And the fintech now has got enough information to ask the customer whether they want to proceed with the transaction. And if they do want to proceed, they need to sign the challenge. So yes, I would like to proceed with that payment, and here's my signed challenge. So we communicate that using a post third-party payment transfers call, and then the blue bank receives that and makes the transfer, and then sends back a notification that the transfer has in fact been committed, and that is communicated back to the client. So we got that two calls to enable this standard PSP flow interaction. So next, Pay can approve the payments on their own device. So, and this is especially important if your blue bank doesn't have an application that works on your device. So how I tried to describe it before. So we've got a sort of a middle tier account holding institution, and they've received a request to pay. So that's a post transfers request. That's a standard request to pay called inside Mojaloop. And then the blue bank needs to capture the payee information and then do a quotes call to determine the transfer terms, and then create a challenge, and then send that challenge through to the fintech using a post third-party payment authorizations call. So now remember, we already linked these accounts, so the blue bank does trust the fintech, and they know how to talk and communicate with each other. And they know how to set and define the challenges and then meet the challenges. So now your fintech provider, which is something potentially that's running on your device, pops up. So and allows you to then say, yes, I would like to proceed with the transfer. The nice thing about this design, or the brilliant thing about this design, is the person paying doesn't need to trust the point of sales device. So if in some merchants, less formalized merchants, maybe you don't want to fill in your PIN on that device, or you provide your fingerprint. You would prefer to use your own phone that you've got in your pocket. So here, this in fact now allows that to happen. And if that PSP provider does have an application running on that service, that can be used by all DFSPs providing PSP services inside Mojaloop. So we get so the user then can choose to accept, or the customer can choose to accept that payment, and then provide that signed challenge. And then that authorization is given back to the blue bank DFSP so that they can proceed with the transfer. Okay, then the third change that we've got in place, which is to allow fintechs to be able to perform a request to pay. And the first question is why? Asking people to pay me, why is that important? I can just ask them to pay me. Whereas what we're talking about is the fintech organization is if you think of it as a fintech often has two aspects of business, and the one is making payments and the other one is receiving payments. And this is a nice way to create one single integration for that business to handle all their types of payments. So the facility is already there. What we're talking about is just defining a slightly different scope. And in effect, it doesn't require the second level authorization, but it's definitely it came up quite a lot in the work that I did in hackathons, in the fintech hackathons, is a lot of those organizations trying to build services to local communities often required both types of transactions, and the PASP integration only supported one of them. So this is a small extension, and I think a valuable one. So how it works is, please ask Fred to pay me X amount into my linked account. So what's nice about it is a level of security there, is that interaction from this is only into that linked account. It's not into anyone else's account. And this is done through a third-party payment transaction request. And then the DFSP accepts that transfer request and informs the PASP that it has in fact accepted it, then makes the transfer, and then notifies the fintech with a patched notifications that the transfer is complete. Now, account discovery authorization. This is a necessary part in banking. You can't release account information to any organization without prior approval. And here, when a fintech is initiating that linking of accounts to with a scope for PISP, it needs to know the account's information available before it can do that. So it needs to get authorization for that first. So in the earlier versions of PISP, this was assumed to happen out of band. And what we've done now is we've built it into the merge loop. So let me show you how we've done that. So the customer is trying to link their account, so saying, I would like to link account from Blue Bank. And then we send a third party's account request call to the Blue Bank, that validates the request and creates a challenge, and then provides a challenge back to the fintech. And then asks the customer for approval and asking them to sign that challenge. And if they give that challenge, then we call our get third-party payment accounts. And then the Blue Bank validates that challenge, looks up the accounts, and provides the accounts back with a put accounts call, and then sends back a list of accounts that can be linked. So then the last part of the changes that we've got in place is revoking consent. So the reason why this is important is because it builds trust. If you, how likely are you to empower an organization to be able to facilitate payments in and out of your account if you know you can't take that consent away? Making it easy to take the consent away, I think, is a critical part in getting this used more widely. And essentially, that customer has got two organizations that they're working through. The one is the fintech itself. So they should be able to remove consent from their fintech application that they created that consent in the first place. And then, but they also should be able to go to their account holding institution and saying, please remove the consent from this fintech. So it gives the customer options from more than one organization, which I think is important to help build trust. So we've laid those out in design. So I would like to thank the contributors who helped put this together. Elaine, Innocent, Karim, Michael, Oliver, Manzi, myself, Paul Macon, and Sam. There's been lots of collaboration on this, so great. Is that an almost question? Okay, cool. Because we can take questions, but before that, we've got lots of documented diagrams and details on how this works and how this translates into things. So we've got a list of references, so please grab it and you can go through them. We've got, firstly, a list of documents for the special interest group. Then we've got a, a specifications repository. This is more for Mojaloop, and this is how Mojaloop handles the APIs. We've got a general specifications repository. The PSP API is in there. We have online documentations on the API, and then we've got a specifications issue board. So if you want an issue or you find a problem that you think needs addressing, the way we go about it is we create issues on the board, and we have lots of comment and debate on some of those issues. Some of those issues have collated debates that have gone on for years before we finally came up with a really nice solution. So please don't be shy to get involved. And that's all for me.